Previously, we have seen different models in embedded system design, like data flow graph model, control data flow graph model, sequential program model, state machine model, right? So next model that we have is concurrent or communicating process model. So as the name itself indicates, concurrent model means things are executed concurrently, means at a time, simultaneously. Okay, so this models concurrently executing tasks or processes. That means they can be executed at a time. They need not be sequential, that is one after the other. It is easier to implement certain requirements in concurrent processing model than conventional sequential execution. So what happens when you, what is the drawback of sequential execution is there will be only one task which is executing at a time, right? It is single sequential execution of task, and thereby it leads to poor processor utilization. Processor is utilized poorly. That means whenever the task requires some input from an input device, or it is waiting for some IO operation, or if it is sleeping for a specified duration, that is if it goes for sleeping for sleep due to some requirement, IO requirement, or if it is waiting for some resource and all, the task will be kept on hold, right? The entire tasks after that task, they will be waiting for that task to complete. So it leads to poor processor utilization. That's why if the task is split into multiple subtasks, if you split the task into multiple subtasks and execute them concurrently, simultaneously, it is possible to tackle the CPU usage by switching the task execution. So whenever the subtask it goes under sleep mode or wait state, then you can switch to another task. That way you can uh, utilize the CPU or the processor efficiently. However, one drawback in this is it requires additional overheads. Like when there are concurrently executing tasks, you need to communicate between them properly. There has to be scheduling of different tasks, and there has to be synchronization between different tasks. Okay, so that is a drawback here. So we will take example of the same seat belt warning system, automatic seat belt warning system, and we will see how we can implement that using concurrent processing model. So for that, we have to split the task into different subtasks. Our task is to monitor the seat belt and warn if the seat belt is not worn, right? So that is our task. We are splitting that into different subtasks. So the different subtasks are wait timer task, wait timer task. This is, it will be waiting for 10 seconds. After the ignition key is on, you have to wait for 10 seconds, right, for that particular thing. The timer task waiting for 10 seconds, that you call the wait timer task. Then you have the ignition key status monitoring task, to check whether the ignition key is on or not. That is ignition key status monitoring task. Then you have seat belt status monitoring task, whether the seat belt is worn or not. It is the task for checking whether the seat belt is worn or not. Then alarm control task, to start the alarm and to stop the alarm. That is another task. It is alarm control task. Then you have alarm timer task. The alarm also has a timer for 5 seconds. For that, alarm timer task for waiting 5 seconds. So these are the different subtasks which can be executed concurrently. But the thing is, these five tasks we have identified, they cannot be executed randomly or sequentially. One after the other also you cannot do it. And you cannot execute them randomly also as you like it. So we have to properly synchronize that. And to synchronize, we have to use one mechanism. For that, we have to create different events. Okay. For example, the alarm control task is executed only when the wait timer is expired, right? First, you have to wait for 10 seconds, then alarm control task is executed. That means alarm control task, it will start the alarm, then wait for 5 seconds, and then stop the alarm. That is the alarm control task. For that, first you have to wait for 10 seconds. After that only you can execute. Then apart from that, you should also check if the ignition key is on or off, and if the seat belt is on or off. If the ignition key is on and the seat belt is off and the wait timer is expired, then only you can execute alarm control task. So that way there has to be proper synchronization between different tasks. Okay, so for this we will use events. We will use events to indicate to the tasks when they have to be executed. So we will use this event wait timer expire. This is the name we have given for the event. Wait timer expire. That means the wait timer has expired. This is associated with the timer task event, and it will be in the reset state initially. Reset means it will be 0. When the timer expires, it will be set, means that particular event becomes 1. Similarly, other events are there, ignition on and ignition off. Ignition on means it is associated with ignition key status monitoring task. It will check whether the ignition key is on or off. If it is on, this will be set. If it is off, it will be reset. Then there is seat belt status monitoring task. For that, we will have two more events: seat belt on and seat belt off. Okay, seat belt on and seat belt off. If the seat belt is worn, we will use seat belt on is set. If the seat belt is not worn, seat belt off is set. Okay, here actually ignition key, if it is on, ignition on will be set. If ignition key is off, ignition off will be set. Okay, depending on what is the status of the ignition key or what is the status of the seat belt, one of these will be set. So to execute them concurrently, these are the different tasks in seatbelt warning system. So we have to create all these events and tasks. So these are the 5 events we have seen, right? Timer expire, create and initialize these events. Wait timer expire, ignition on, ignition off, seatbelt on, seatbelt off, alarm timer start, alarm timer expire. 7 events. Okay, these are the 7 events we have. Then there are 5 tasks. Create all these tasks. Create task, wait timer, create task, ignition key status monitor, create task, seat belt status monitor, alarm control and alarm time. So we need to model this properly. This is the concurrent processing program model for seat belt warning system. Okay, you can see here, these are the 5 different tasks. We have the wait timer task, ignition key status monitor task, seat belt status monitor task, then alarm control task and alarm timer task. So wait timer task, it is initially for waiting for 10 seconds. So here we have initially we will wait for 10 seconds. So it is, you can use the function sleep for 10 seconds. Okay, so then after 10 seconds, you are going to set the event wait time expire. Okay, wait timer expire. After waiting for 10 seconds, you are setting the event wait timer expire. Okay, so once the wait timer is expired, the alarm control task, it will check the other 2 things. Along with this, it will also check the other 2 things, whether the ignition key is on and seat belt is still off. For that, there are 2 other tasks. Okay, this ignition key status monitor and seat belt status monitor, they are monitoring tasks, means continuously they will be checking a particular thing. So we will have that in a while loop. While 1 means always it will be checking if ignition key is on. Okay, if ignition key is on, you are going to set the event ignition on and reset the event ignition off. Else means if ignition key is off, then you are going to set the event ignition off and reset the event ignition on. That means if ignition key is on, then ignition on will be set, event ignition on will be set, and if ignition key is off, then the event ignition off will be set. Similarly, there is another monitoring task, that is seat belt status monitoring task. This will also be in a while loop because it is checking continuously the status of the seat belt. If the seat belt is on, that means if seat belt is fastened, you set the event seat belt on and reset the event seat belt off. Else, that means if seat belt is off, you set the event seat belt off and reset the event seat belt on. That means if at all you have worn the seat belt, that means if you have fastened the seat belt, then the event seat belt on will be set. If not, the event seatbelt off will be set. Okay, so in alarm control task, we are going to get the inputs from these 3 tasks. Okay, so in case it will be waiting for the signaling of wait timer expire. Once the wait timer expire happens, then it is going to check ignition key on and seatbelt off. Okay, if ignition key is on and seatbelt is off, then start alarm. Okay, start the alarm. It's a function to start the alarm. Then to start the alarm, you have to set the event alarm start. For that, after setting the event alarm start, you have to wait for 5 seconds. Means the alarm should run for 5 seconds. So we go to the alarm timer task. Here it will wait for the event alarm start. Once it receives that particular event, once that particular event is set, then alarm will start. That means it will be waiting for 5 seconds. The alarm will keep on for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, you are setting event alarm time expire. Okay, alarm timer is expired after 5 seconds. So apart from alarm timer expire, for stopping the alarm, it is not the alarm timer only that is the thing we are considering. We are going to check whether the ignition key becomes off or the seat belt is worn before the alarm time expires. So we have to wait for these three events. So in alarm control task, before stopping alarm, we are waiting for the signaling of alarm timer expire, or ignition off, or seat belt on, right? So if any of these things, these three things satisfy, then we are going to stop the alarm, right? So this is the way we can model the seatbelt warning system using concurrent processing model. So here, the task is subdivided or divided into different subtasks, and all these tasks, they communicate with each other, they create events, and they send the events, the signaling of those events to the different tasks which require them, and based on those particular events, the tasks will be executed, right? So this is one example of concurrent processing model for the same seatbelt warning system. The next kind of model we have is object oriented model. The object oriented model, it's an object based model, means we are creating objects, okay, for modeling system requirements. What do you mean by an object? So you might have studied object-oriented programming languages like C++ or Java that you are studying, right? It's an object-oriented language. So it disseminates a complex software requirement into simple, well-defined pieces. Those pieces are called objects. So it's like, in conventional programming, if it is top-down approach, this is bottom-up approach. Object-oriented model is bottom-up approach. You start from an object and build on it. Object oriented model, it brings reusability, maintainability, and productivity. These are the advantages. So in object oriented modeling, an object is an entity used for representing or modeling a particular piece of the system. Okay, so you can reuse that particular object. You can create a group of objects, a set of objects, and call it a class and other things, right? Each object is characterized by a set of unique behavior and state. So a class is an abstract description of a set of objects, and it can be considered as a blueprint of an object. A class is a blueprint of an object. So this class, it represents the state of an object through different variables, through member variables, and object behavior through member functions. The member variables and member functions of a class, it can be private, public, or protected. These are the different things we have for the variables or the functions. We can have private functions or variables, public or protected. Private means it is limited within the class. Okay, you can access them only within the class. Private member variables and functions are accessible only within the class, whereas if you declare them as public, then you can access them within the class as well as outside the class. Okay, protected means they are the variables or functions which are protected from external access. From external programs, they cannot access that particular variables or functions. So however, classes derived from a parent class can also access the protected member functions and variables. Okay, that means if the classes, they belong to the same parent, there can be a parent class and different sub child classes, right? So if the child classes belong to the same parent, then they can have access to protected member functions and variables also. So this concept of objects and class of particular objects, that brings abstraction, hiding, and protection into the model. Okay, so it's just a concept of object oriented model. So we have seen different kinds of computational models, starting from data flow graph model, control data flow graph model, state machine model, sequential process model, sequential and concurrent or communicating process model, and then object oriented model. So next topic that we have in this uh, chapter is embedded firmware design and development. So what are the different approaches we have for embedded firmware design and development? That means what are the different languages we can use for developing embedded firmware? So when it comes to embedded firmware design, so what do you mean by firmware? It is the software. So we have seen from the beginning that embedded systems, they contain both hardware and software. So if you consider, hardware as the body, This firmware is like the brain. The functioning of the body is dependent on functioning of the brain. It is controlled by the brain, right? Similarly, in case of embedded system, the functioning of the hardware, it is controlled by the firmware. The embedded firmware, it is responsible for controlling various peripherals of the embedded hardware and generating response in accordance with the functional requirements. So it is considered as the master brain of the embedded system. So it's like you're giving intelligence to the embedded system. Without firmware, it is just a hardware, right? It is something which we can, hardware is something which we can see. But firmware is the software. It's like the brain which gives intelligence to the embedded system. So it can happen only once, means it is a one-time process normally in embedded system. It can happen at any stage. It can be immediately after the fabrication of the embedded hardware or at a later stage, right? At the fabrication itself, firmware can be loaded, or it can be left to the user to load some firmware in some applications. For most, for most of the embedded products, the embedded firmware is stored at a permanent memory, that is the program memory called ROM, and they are non-alterable by end users for most of the products. The manufacturer itself puts them into the ROM, and it is non-alterable by end users. Some of the embedded products used in control and instrumentation domain are adaptive, means they can be changed, only few of them. So designing this embedded firmware, while designing this, you need to know what is the hardware. Okay, you need to know what is the hardware, what is the architecture of the hardware that you are going to use, what are the different ports you have, what are the different registers you have, right? So this requires understanding of a particular embedded product hardware, like various component interfacing, memory map details, IO port details, configuration and register details of various hardware chips, and also some programming language to develop or design the firmware. So this process, it starts with the conversion of firmware requirements into a program model using modeling tools. Okay, so once the program model is created, first you have to create a model. Okay, this starts with creating a model using some modeling tools. Once the model is created, we have seen what are the different types of model, right? So once that model is created, next is you have to implement the tasks. Okay, next step is implementation of the tasks and actions by capturing the model using a language which is understandable by the target processor or controller by a suitable language. Okay, we need to capture that particular model and create or implement different tasks and actions. So we will see what are the different approaches we have for embedded firmware design. The firmware design approaches, they are dependent on the complexity of the functions to be performed, the speed of the operation required, and other things. Okay, so it will be dependent on what are your applications. Depending on that, you can choose either of them. There are two basic approaches for embedded firmware design, that is super loop based approach and embedded OS based approach. Super loop based approach means it is conventional procedural based design, means one after the other different tasks will be executed and they will be repeated again and again. It will be put in a super loop. Embedded OS means there will be an operating system. In super loop based, there need not be an operating system. Embedded OS based approach means there will be an embedded operating system. There will be other operating system will take care of the execution of the tasks. So we will see them one by one. The first one is super loop based approach. The super loop based approach for embedded firmware development, it is adopted for applications that are not time critical and where the response time is not so important. Okay, a simple functions which are not time critical and response time is not important. It is very similar to conventional procedural programming where the code is executed task by task, that is one after the other sequentially. The task listed at the top of the program code is executed first, and the tasks just below the top are executed after completing the first task. Then after that, the next task, that means one by one, each task will be executed. So in a multiple task based system, each task is executed in serial, that means sequentially. So you can have it in this way. Okay, first we have to configure the common parameters and perform initialization for various hardware components like memory, registers, etc. Then start the first task and execute it. After completing that first task, execute the second task. After that second task, execute the next task. Okay, keep on executing it until you execute the last defined task. After executing last task, jump back to the first task again and keep on executing this one by one. That's why it is called a super loop. That means all the tasks are executed in sequence and they are executed again and again, one after the other. So the order in which the tasks to be executed are fixed, and they are hard coded in the code itself. You cannot change it. So also the operation is an infinite loop based approach. Okay, the order is fixed, they will be coded in the code itself. It will be there one after the other, they will be executed. If you see it as a C program, it will be this way: void main. I mean, that means in the main program you make some configurations. This is a pseudo code actually. Then initializations, whatever we have. Then in a while loop, that means continuously you will be executing one task after the other. Task 1, task 2, task 3, till last task, that is task n. Okay, so almost all tasks in embedded applications are non-ending. That means they are continuous and are repeated infinitely throughout the operation. This repetition is achieved by using an infinite loop, like using this while one. Hence the name infinite loop or super loop based approach. How you can come out of this loop? How you can come out of this loop is, there are ways. The only way to come out of the loop is either a hardware reset, that means by pressing some reset button, or by asserting an interrupt, by using some interrupt. A hardware reset brings the program execution back to the main loop. Okay, back to the main loop, it will come out of the loop. An interrupt request suspends the task execution temporarily and performs the corresponding interrupt routine. Okay, if an interrupt happens, the task will be suspended temporarily. It will complete that interrupt routine, and upon completion of the interrupt routine, it restarts from the point where it got interrupted. Suppose at task 2, you are getting an interrupt. It will stop here. It will go to the interrupt routine, execute that, and come back to the same point. It will again start from task 3. I mean the next task where it had stopped. Advantages of this is it does not require an operating system. Okay, there is no need for scheduling which task is to be executed and assigning priority to each task. That we are not assigning any priority to the tasks. Okay, because the order in which the tasks are executed, it is there in the code itself. We're not going to schedule the tasks. They are executed one after the other only. The priorities are fixed, and the order in which the tasks are to be executed are also fixed. In the code itself, it is fixed. Hence, the code for performing these tasks will be residing in the code memory without an operating system image. You don't require an operating system. So where do we use this super loop based approach? So we can use them in low cost embedded products, okay, where response time or the timing requirement is not so critical. Some embedded products demands this type of approach if some tasks itself are sequential. That means if it is one after the other. For example, like reading or writing data to and from a card, a memory card, using a card reader, requires a sequence of operations. One after the other, it will be executed. You cannot do it randomly or at a time, concurrently. Like checking the presence of the card, then authenticating the operation, and then start reading or writing another things. Okay, it should strictly follow a specified sequence, and combination of these series of tasks constitutes a single task, namely data read or data write. Okay, in these cases, you can use this super loop based approach. One more example of super loop based product is an electronic video game toy. An electronic video game toy containing keypad and display unit. The program inside the product, it may be designed in such a way that it reads the keys to detect whether the user has given any input. If the user has given any input, if any keys press is detected, then the graphic display is updated. Depending on what button the user presses, the displays will change. The keyboard scanning and display updating happens at a reasonably high rate. So even if the application misses a key press, it won't create any critical issues. Nothing will happen if something is not detected or something goes wrong, right? Even if the application misses a key press, it won't create any critical issues. Rather, it will be treated as a bug in the firmware. You can just ignore it as one small bug in the firmware. It is not economical to embed an OS into such things, into low-cost products, and it is an utter waste to do so if the response requirements are not crucial. So in critical applications, we need to go for embedding an operating system. Otherwise, a small program is enough to carry out the tasks. So the drawbacks is, since it is sequential, any failure in any part of a single task will affect the total system. If one task fails, the other tasks which are executed after that will be kept on hold. If the program hangs up at some point while executing a task, it will remain there forever, and ultimately the product stops functioning. Okay, you can use watchdog timers to overcome this. What watchdog timers do is, each task will have a time for execution, right? These watchdog timers will be monitoring whether the task has completed within that particular time. If not, it will cause an interrupt or it will reset and the system will reset. Okay, to overcome this, you can use that, but this in turn may cause additional hardware cost and firmware overhead. Some additional hardware is required for this. Another thing is lack of real timeliness. They are not real time. The super loop based approach, embedded products based on the super loop based approach, they're not real time. If the number of tasks to be executed within an application increases, the time at which each task is repeated also increases, right? If there are more number of tasks, then the same task to be executed, it has to wait for so many number of tasks to complete, and again its turn comes after every task has completed, right? This brings the probability of missing out some events. By the time it is executing again, it might miss out some events. For example, in a system with keypads, in order to identify the key press, you may have to press the keys for a sufficiently long time till the keypad status monitoring task is executed internally by the firmware. Okay, so if it requires some operation like this, if you just by a single press, sometimes you might miss that particular key press. Interrupts can be used for external events requiring real-time attention. That is one of the solutions for this. By using interrupts, you can try to avoid missing certain events. Next kind of approach we have is embedded operating system or embedded OS based approach. So this thing we will see in the next class.